Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of the hour. The United States offers NATO-style security guarantees to Ukraine as talks with European and Ukrainian officials show progress towards ending the war. US envoys warn the offer is time-limited with no agreement yet on territorial concessions. Australian police say the vehicle used by the Bondi Beach attackers contained homemade Islamic State flags and improvised explosive devices. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese announces plans to tighten gun laws and accelerate a national firearms register. Los Angeles police charge the son of filmmaker Rob Reiner with the murder of his parents after they are found dead at their home. Authorities say the 32-year-old suspect is in custody without bail as the investigation continues. US President Donald Trump sues the BBC for defamation over edited footage of a January the 6th speech that he says misrepresent his words. Trump seeks up to $10 billion in damages after the BBC admits an editing error but denies any legal basis for the claim. The US military says it carries out strikes on 3 vessels in international waters in the Eastern Pacific, killing 8 people. US Southern Command says intelligence shows the boats are operating along known narco-trafficking routes. President Trump says he has asked Chinese leader Xi Jinping to consider releasing Hong Kong pro-democracy tycoon Jimmy Lai after his conviction under the national security law yesterday. The United Kingdom also calls for Lai's immediate release, describing the case as politically motivated. The United States suspends a technology agreement with Britain covering AI, quantum computing and civil nuclear cooperation, according to reports. UK officials say the move comes as the Trump administration seeks broader trade concessions beyond the tech partnership. Britain's Financial Conduct Authority launches a broad consultation on proposed rules for the crypto industry ahead of formal regulation in 2027. The FCA says the share of UK adults holding crypto has fallen from 12% to 8% in the past year. We start this hour in Europe, and US President Donald Trump says a deal to end Russia's war in Ukraine may be within reach. Speaking at the White House, Trump said progress followed talks with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and several European leaders. Washington has offered NATO-style security guarantees for Kyiv, including protections similar to Article 5. European allies Britain, France and Germany have proposed a European force to monitor any ceasefire. US and European envoys say progress has been made on most issues, but territorial concessions remain the biggest obstacle. Trump also says that he thinks they're closer now than they have ever been. Let's take a listen in to the US president.
War should have never ever started. But it did, and we're trying to get it solved. That was Biden's situation. We're trying to get it done. And I think we're closer now, and they will tell you that they're closer now. We had numerous conversations with President Putin of Russia, and I think we're closer now than we have been.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky described discussions with US officials as difficult but productive. He says he believes the United States will help bridge differences and find a workable compromise. Zelensky also says he will do everything possible to secure clear answers on security guarantees as peace talks continue. He also insisted that seized Russian assets must be fully used to strengthen Ukraine's defense and long-term security. Let's take a listen in to President Zelensky.
Вчора і сьогодні тут, в Берліні, відбулись наші консультації з американською стороною. І це також дуже важлива розмова. Це такий центр Берлін, таких важливих сьогодні дипломатичних рішень. У нас завжди такі розмови, вони непрості, скажу вам чесно, але розмова була про нас. Там є прогрес. Я бачив військові деталі від військових, так, які вони напрацьовували, вони виглядають дуже непогано, хоча це перший драфт. І питання моніторингу під час припинення вогню – це частина, на мій погляд, гарантій безпеки. Активи, які знаходяться саме тут, знаходяться на території Європейського Союзу в більшості своїй. Ці кошти мають реально і повністю працювати на захист від агресії Росії. Це справедливо, це розумно і це спрацює. Важливо, що Німеччина це підтримує. Кожне рішення, яке посилює Україну та посилює нашу з вами Європу, це спосіб наблизити.
Joining us now is David K. Johnston. He's an American author and he joins us live from New York. David, as always, it's a pleasure to talk to you. President Trump says a deal here may be in reach to solve and bring peace to Ukraine. We've heard, of course, similar claims plenty of times before. What is different this time?
Well, several things are different and they're not necessarily good. First of all, Trump, by setting deadlines, is trying to pressure Zelensky into an agreement in which the Russians would get not only the territory they've managed to acquire with their invasion, but land they have not been able to acquire. That's going to be a very big sticking point. Secondly, Trump and some of the Western countries are emphasizing security guarantees. Ukraine has an existing American security guarantee that was part of the 1994 treaty under which Ukraine gave up nuclear weapons after the fall of the Soviet Union, returned them to Russia on the promise that Russia would never invade and the United States would provide security guarantees. So, what guarantees that are now being proposed and why anyone would trust them is a bit of a mystery. I think what's going on here is that Trump wants to bolt and do something, and that the Western European countries, several of whose leaders have expressed their concern that there will be more warfare down the road if Russia succeeds in conquering large parts of Ukraine, are trying to figure out how to keep Trump in the corral.
Indeed, David, and the US here is talking about NATO-style guarantees, Article 5-style guarantees for Ukraine without a formal membership to the organization. In practical terms, how enforceable will those guarantees be?
European countries feel threatened by further movement by the Russians. I mean, Putin has made it very clear and reinforced it with aggressive tactics lately, including overflights by military jets, drones, disruptions, and efforts to sow chaos in the western part of Europe, that he is still pursuing his dream that dates back to the previous century of rebuilding the old Soviet Union. And the leaders of the three little Baltic states all are very clear that they expect that if there is a settlement in which Ukraine gives up a lot of territory, that once the Russian economy can rebound and they can rebuild their depleted war material, they expect that Russian tanks are going to roll in.
Indeed, and the Europeans have proposed a force to monitor the ceasefire. How credible of a deterrent is that, do you think?
If you have a real peacekeeping force that is stationed along the border between occupied Ukraine and free Ukraine, that could be a significant factor. It's also very expensive, and it would not preclude Putin in the future or his successors from moving troops into some other area, say taking over eastern Poland.
Yes, David K. Johnston, do stay with us as we have further updates. But this time coming out of Australia, and the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, says the Bondi Beach shooting that targeted a Jewish gathering was motivated by Islamic State ideology, as police continue investigating the deadliest mass shooting in the country in nearly 30 years. Authorities say the attackers identified as a father and son and opened fire during a Hanukkah event at Sydney's Bondi Beach, killing at least 15 people and wounding more than 40 others before being stopped by police. Investigators confirmed the suspects had travelled to the Philippines prior to the attack and that their vehicle contained improvised explosive devices and Islamic State flags, strengthening this terror link. Prime Minister Albanese also said the younger suspect had been investigated by Australia's intelligence agency in 2019, but was not considered a person of interest at that time. As memorials grow at Bondi Beach, the government says it is stepping up efforts to counter anti-Semitism, while residents renew calls for tougher gun laws after police confirmed the main suspect was a licensed gun owner. Meanwhile, the Israeli ambassador has visited Sydney and the massacre site, calling for greater Jewish protection as memorials expand and survivors continue treatment in hospital. Let's take a listen in.
The only community that is in need to go through security in order to exercise their right to worship their God is the Jewish community. I don't know when was the last time that you visit a temple, a church, or a mosque. The doors are open. Only the Australians of Jewish faith are forced to worship their gods behind closed doors, CCTV guards. It's insane.
My message to Jewish Australians is that we stand with you as a nation. We embrace you at what is a terrible time. These anti-Semitic terrorist attacks will not be successful with their objective, which is to divide us as a nation. We will continue to come together as a nation. Sunday's tragedy will have, of course, an immediate and lasting impact on many Australians, but the Jewish community here in Sydney and nationally, first responders and people in Bondi and Sydney, the impact will be particularly acute. The Australian government has made significant investments in mental health support, including expanding Headspace and the creation of Medicare mental.
David, of course, we saw homemade ISIS flags, IEDs, and evidence of foreign travel with these two suspects. What does that mean for the current atmosphere of online radicalization, Islamic extremist radicalization that is currently going on, even as far as Australia is concerned?
Well, we're seeing all around the world a big increase in anti-Semitism. There's no question about that. You can see it here in the United States, in Canada. And this attack in Australia is not part of an organized effort. It's a father and son who became radicalized a quarter century after they came to Australia. And they were very effective in terms of their mission to kill people. The father is dead, and the son, the last report I heard, was still in critical condition in the hospital. But I think we're going to see more of this around the world, and it's not just anti-Semitism that we're seeing. In America, we're seeing more racial attacks based on racism, and I think all of this reflects that we're living in a world where we have unaccountable governments like Netanyahu's administration in Israel that are overreacting to things that have happened and not following proportionality, a fundamental principle in international conflict. And the future on this is, I suspect, more trouble before we get past this. The one good thing that may come out of this is the Australians may follow the lead of New Zealand and tighten up on their gun laws.
Yeah, indeed. What has been your thoughts on the Israeli response to this? Of course, we've seen the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu pretty much slam the government in Australia. We've of course seen a visit to the site to the Israeli ambassador. What's your reading on how the world's only Jewish state has responded to this tragedy?
Well, Netanyahu has a very difficult time maintaining support in his country. There have been massive demonstrations in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem against the just meat axe approach that has been taken by the Netanyahu administration to Gaza. And so he's going to do everything he can to try and strengthen his position and try to prevent a change of government. And remember, he's on a suspended for the moment trial for corruption. He has a government with ministers who hold incredibly anti-Palestinian, anti-Muslim, anti-Arab views of a kind that we haven't previously seen in an Israeli government. And I think he's running a serious risk of turning Israel into a pariah state. Israel has very legitimate and serious concerns about its security. Nobody questions that. It's how you respond to things like the October attack by Hamas, which was outrageous, but the response has been wildly disproportionate. It's turned a lot of countries against Israel. And one sign of that is when Canberra decided that it will recognize a Palestinian state, something Netanyahu rejects. He does not want to have a two-state solution.
David K. Johnston, thank you very much, as always. It's always brilliant talking to you here on NewsX World. Thank you for taking the time. We now move on, and more news coming out of the United States next. And US President Donald Trump has said that actor, director and political activist Rob Reiner was deranged following his Truth Social post about the actor's death. In his post, Trump had earlier criticized Reiner, writing that the director has incurable affliction tied to his opposition to Trump. Let's listen in to what Trump has said on the matter.
Well, I wasn't a fan of his at all. He was a deranged person as far as Trump is concerned. He said he knew it was false. In fact, it's the exact opposite, that I was a friend of Russia, controlled by Russia. You know, it was the Russia hoax. He was one of the people behind it. I think he hurt himself in career-wise. He became like a deranged person, Trump derangement syndrome. So I was not a fan of Rob Reiner at all in any way, shape, or form. I thought he was very bad for our country, yeah.
This comes as Reiner and his wife Michelle were found dead in their Los Angeles home, with police investigating the circumstances as an apparent homicide. Local media had earlier reported that the couple had been stabbed to death. Meanwhile, the couple's son Nick Reiner had been arrested on homicide charges and is now being held in a Los Angeles County bail at a $4 million bond. Nick has spoken openly for years about his struggles with substance abuse and about being homeless at times when he was refusing to go into rehab. He told People magazine in 2016 that he first went into rehab for drug abuse at the age of 15 and that he eventually had at least 17 stays in rehab facilities over the years. Let's in fact listen in to what the LAPD chief has had to say on the incident.
Yesterday at December 14th, about 3:40 in the afternoon, LAPD responded to a residence, the residence of Rob and Michelle Reiner, located in West Los Angeles Division. At that location, they found two deceased adults, a male and a female. Through the night, working with the coroner's office, they were able to identify them definitively as Rob and Michelle Reiner. We have our robbery homicide division handling the investigation. They worked throughout the night on this case and were able to take into custody Nick Reiner, a suspect in this case. He was subsequently booked for murder. and is being held on $4 million bail. Pretty much that's what I can share at this point. But again,
Matthew Verdum joins us now. He's an American journalist and author, and he joins us live from Washington, D.C. Matthew, this is quite a first. Less than, I think it was even 12 hours since Reiner's death was announced. Donald Trump called him deranged in a Truth Social post. What are your thoughts about the insensitivity when it came to the US president, and of course him doubling down on those statements in person?
I can understand President Donald Trump's criticisms of Rob Reiner when he was alive. Rob Reiner was an affective, emotional liberal who would just rant endlessly and go on diatribes that oftentimes didn't make any sense. However, I think what people don't like, for the most part, is the fact that Donald Trump did this after news started spreading that Rob Reiner and his wife were apparently murdered by their son in his home. Reportedly stabbed to death, or saw one report saying that their throats were slit. So I think it is the insensitivity of Trump that he's not a private citizen. He's the president of the United States, and people think he shouldn't be trashing a culturally significant, largely beloved figure, an actor and acclaimed movie director, when the man has just been murdered by his son. People thought that was just. They understand why Trump doesn't like Reiner, but they think that he went too far and that he should have held back and exercised some self-censorship and waited before sharing his true thoughts on Rob Reiner. And as well, Trump was very aggressive in the way he put it in his posts on Truth Social, and started saying that you've seen the posts, so you know that Trump was very in your face with his criticisms of Rob Reiner, and people think it was just too much for the President of the United States to do.
Matthew, of course, America extremely politically divisive between the new Trump Republican Party and the Democrats. Looking at this, do you think that this will be how do you think this will be looked upon by even Donald Trump's supporters?
I think there are some hardcore people who've been defending Trump on social media all day long, saying Trump survived 2 assassination attempts, he was impeached twice. The leftist Democrats have tried to put him in prison repeatedly. They've tried to take away everything from him. They raided his home at Mar-a-Lago, and that he should be allowed. He should be given some allowance here, some leeway to launch into a diatribe against Rob Reiner after he was killed. But I don't think most people feel that way. Certainly not most people on the Republican right. They think that Rob Reiner was an important cultural figure, a great character actor. I just had on the TV a few minutes ago, The Wolf of Wall Street, where he's, where he's a grumpy, curmudgeonly father, and he's a director of acclaimed films like The Princess Bride and Stand By Me and When Harry Met Sally. And he really is a beloved Hollywood figure, and most people, apart from his political rants, thought pretty highly of Rob Reiner. People who were into movies, that is.
Yeah, no, it's a real tragic situation. Matthew,
Right.
Matthew, do stay with us as we have further news next coming out of the United States. And Intel has appointed an economic advisor to the US President Donald Trump as its head of government affairs, months after the US government has taken a 10% stake in the company. Intel has said that Robin Colwell, Deputy Assistant to the President and Deputy Director of the National Economic Council, has been appointed to head its Government Affairs Office. Meanwhile, the position had been vacant after Bruce Andrews, who had worked in the Commerce Department under the former US President Barack Obama, as he left Intel after the November US elections. However, Intel has also appointed James Chu as Vice President of Intel Government Technologies, as the unit that oversees its business with the US government after the departure of Intel veteran Christopher George earlier this year. Intel also appointed Annie Shea Rexer, a Cisco Systems veteran who has mostly worked at Sambanova Systems, a chip startup where Tan is an investor through his extensive venture capital holdings as Chief Marketing and Communications Officer. Joining us once again is Matthew Verdum. What can you tell us about this development from Intel and the broader tech world, Matthew?
Well, just to put it in context, it's very common in American big business and American politics for people call this the revolving door. People will work in a political position. She was deputy director of the National Economic Council, apparently for less than a year, because Trump hasn't even been back in office for a year yet. Though to some people it seems like it's been longer. But anyway, it's a common practice for people to work in the government in positions of authority, and then to go, then get well-paying corporate jobs lobbying the government. And that's what I understand she's going to be doing at Intel. She's going to be involved in government relations, which is a special. I think she's going to be senior VP of government relations at Intel. And this is what people do. They go from being government officials to being lobbyists, and they make a great deal of money, and people are suspicious of the practice, and it's been criticized, but it's been that way for decades, and probably Intel thinks that they've really gotten a good score here, getting her, taking her away from the White House and putting her in their operation, especially since I think, as you alluded to earlier, the government took a 10% stake in Intel earlier this year, which is unusual for the federal government to do. And America doesn't usually do state capitalism, but for some reason Trump thought it was a good idea. And so, you know, Intel wants to have strong, you know, now that they're owned 10% by the federal government, it's especially important for them to have good relations with the federal government. So from their point of view, from a business point of view, it makes perfect sense for them to hire Robin Colwell,
yes,
to head their government relations branch.
Yes, Matthew Verdum, thank you very much for joining us and talking to us about those topics. It's always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
We now move on, and at least 6 people have been killed in a private jet crash in central Mexico, according to preliminary information from civil protection authorities in the state of Mexico. The aircraft, a Cessna Citation III private jet, went down on Monday near the city of Toluca after departing from Acapulco. Officials said the jet was carrying 8 passengers and 2 crew members at the time of the crash. Emergency teams confirmed the impact triggered a fire, which has now fully been contained. Cooling operations and debris removal are continuing at the site as authorities work to secure the area. Officials have urged the public to avoid the crash location while recovery efforts remain underway. The cause of the incident has not yet been determined, as an investigation is now underway to establish what led to the fatal crash. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international updates.